Our course will take us between Washington and New York.
It was a top-secret mission
We will not fail.
that became an international incident.
Report!
Radiation levels are rising too fast.
Now, only one man stands between the superpowers. The mission's over. And total disaster.
I'll tell you when the mission is over.
The fate of the world is at stake in the dramatic thriller K-19, starring Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson.
And action.
Directed by Catherine Bigelow, K-19 is inspired by the incredible true story of a Russian nuclear submarine whose classified mission was hidden from the world for nearly 30 years. At the heart of the story is a crew of unsung heroes who risk their lives on a journey destined for disaster.
We're cursed.
This story could not be shrouded in secrecy any longer. The lives of these men needed to be acknowledged.
The script to me was just fascinating because it's a great story about survival and courage, camaraderie. Those are epic themes.
The crew need you to show courage, not fear. Fear is contagious.
It was a very harrowing experience, and it bonded these men together in a really extraordinary way.
Our fate is in your hands. May God be with you.
It's a human story of heroism at the nth degree of these submariners saving each other and saving the submarine and possibly staving off World War III.
The radiation is going to kill us all.
Readings rising in every compartment.
I am not going back down! I am not going down!
We could get help from the Americans.
It is treason.
This is an extraordinary story of incredible bravery in the face of what seemed like certain death.
Our situation is desperate. At any moment, we could have an explosion.
Hiroshima, 1.4 megatons.
In their hands, the fate of the world rested.
Service the boat!
Roll, please. And action.
No sailors have been given such a boat as K-19. It is the finest submarine in the world.
The incredible story of K-19 unfolds during one of the most dangerous periods in history. The year is 1961, and the Cold War is at its height. K-19 was Russia's first nuclear-powered submarine, designed to launch nuclear ballistic missiles at the United States.
The K-19 was brand new technology, and the powers that be in the military were trying to rush this boat into service and get it on station off the coast of the United States as a deterrent, by the way, as a balance to an American ship which was posing a similar threat on Russia.
Russia felt the urgency. So, in their rush to get the submarine ready, they send this ship out that's barely seaworthy.
Captain!
The drill is over. Do you have an explanation for this disappointment?
Comrade Admiral, it's just another burnout.
That's what I have to fight before I can fight a war.
Liam Neeson plays the ship's original captain, Polenian.
Liam is the commanding officer of the K-19 who's charged with getting it ready. He fails to do that for a number of reasons that are not his fault, but nonetheless, they replace him with Captain Vostrikov.
The last minute, the captain that I play is put in command, but Polenian is kept on the boat as executive officer. So that relationship is fraught with difficulties from the very beginning.
Sea trials begin in 2 weeks.
The boat isn't ready, Captain.
We deliver or we drown.
Wait, give me a gun!
Vostrikov is a perfectionist, and because the crew is not ready and the boat is not ready, he really has to be tough on them in order to carry out their mission. If this were not a drill, the boat would be crippled and half the crew would be dead.
He's the captain. I'm executive officer. I'm pleased. I'm going to be with my boys.
Polenian is easygoing and a father to the crew. So there's a great philosophical difference between these two characters.
You know what the men are calling this boat? The Widowmaker.
Surprised they confide their fears to their commanding officer.
The crew is a family. The captain is the father.
My own father inspired more fear than he indulged.
Ford brought a unique passion to K-19, serving both as the star and executive producer of the project.
His love of research and detail extends well beyond sort of the words on the page, and he gets very, very involved in every aspect of the production.
Lock it up!
Harrison Ford is a true collaborator He works through the story, working through the details of the story, challenging the material. And he has a kind of rigor and stamina that is, in a way, that Russian mindset.
Without me, you are nothing. Without you, I am nothing.
I had plenty of advice from people who told me, don't take that part. That guy's not very nice. Huh. That sounds interesting.
Harrison is entering into kind of a unique situation where he's playing a foreign character who in normal times would be the villain. But he has been able to take this captain and create a very heroic character out of him.
Continue the dive to 300 meters.
300 meters is close to crush depth.
I know.
As Polenian, Neeson plays an equally determined individual with his own agenda.
You needlessly endangered this boat and its crew. 200 million Soviet citizens are depending on us, Captain Vostrikov, to save them from nuclear attack.
Liam's a wonderful theatrically trained actor, and he brings a kind of depth of character and credibility to the film.
And here we go.
He's a great, great actor. And it lends a stature to the film that just lifts it up. This is the man who did Schindler's List.
I was told there was some complaining. But I said, not my men. They're the best crew in the fleet.
To play the ship's crew, the filmmakers recruited an international cast of young actors.
We have a group of fantastic young actors. Some of them have already distinguished themselves in other roles. Many of them have not. We're getting fantastic performances from these guys, and they have been terrific. Great faces, great performances, great heart.
All hands below! All hands below!
In June 1961, the captains of K-19 and their crew of 102 men set out on their journey to the Arctic Sea, unaware of the fate that would await them. The journey to bring K-19 to the screen began in Russia, where the filmmakers shot several key scenes in the locations where they actually took place.
It was very valuable to start the film in Russia. We were surrounded by people that were really Russian, eating Russian food, smelling Russian smells.
I think shooting in Russia was the way to ground all of us in the reality of this piece.
There is no train station in the world that looks like the main Moscow station with the lights and the huge busts of Lenin. It's almost a picture postcard kind of place.
Physically, all of those artifacts of the Cold War are still there. And it was very easy to imagine yourself back in 1961.
Most amazingly, the producers gained access to a formerly top-secret military command center.
This is the finest, most up-to-date submarine at sea.
We shot in the war rooms of the army in Moscow, something that I wouldn't believe would have happened in 100 years. Think about that. 5 years ago, they would have shot you if you even took a step inside that building.
But it's to stop the Americans from destroying Moscow and Leningrad. Only one thing, a certain knowledge of destruction in return. K-19 is that knowledge.
The filmmakers' greatest challenge was recreating the pride of the Soviet fleet. Instead of using miniatures or computers to duplicate the K-19, they sought out the real thing.
We didn't want to create the K-19 with CG, and we were lucky enough to find a Russian Juliet-class submarine of the same era as the K-19.
In a neglected dry dock in St. Petersburg, Florida, the filmmakers found their K-19.
Well, this is the first time we've been called in to make an old Russian sub seaworthy, and I've been in the marine game all my life. It was originally planned that this submarine would be a museum and a restaurant. It didn't work, so the producers have leased the Juliet, and I've been here some 2 months prepping the ship. It's a bit like a patchwork quilt, you know. Yeah. You end up with more patches than quilts.
Once the ship was made seaworthy, it began a 13-day trek up the eastern seaboard to Halifax. There, the film's design team began the arduous task of transforming the decaying diesel sub into the pristine K-19. They worked from a recently uncovered copy of the sub's original blueprints.
Getting the Juliet retrofitted into a Hotel II class submarine was very important to Harrison. He wanted that to be authentic. The Hotel has a much longer sail or conning tower piece and a longer tail, so it was a pretty big undertaking.
A new sail made of fiberglass would nearly double the size of the existing tower. But lengthening the ship would be a far greater challenge.
Basically, what we're doing is we're building from stem to stern the K-19. So the Juliet submarine comes to about here, and we're going to extend it. And that extension has to be seaworthy. In other words, the sea hitting the side of this is an enormous force, and so this is not just a cosmetic build-on. So that's a whole shipyard crew that's building that extension.
Retrofitting the sub and adding more than 100 feet in length was a complicated and dangerous task.
Well, I'd been on it when it was just a diesel submarine, and then they built this thing around it. I keep walking up to it and like tapping on the side, trying to figure out what it's made out of. I have no idea how they did it.
Action man.
That night, you thought you were in Murmansk, getting ready for the departure of the ship. It was awesome. I mean, you say to yourself, did we build that? I'm amazed that we built it.
Simulate an electrical fire in the galley, please.
Fire on switch box number 65. This is a drill.
During the last 2 weeks in June 1961, the K-19 and its crew were put through a battery of intensive drills to test the limits of the sub. And then, on July 4th, disaster struck.
On its way toward the North Atlantic, one of 2 reactors began to melt down.
The core temperature is at 400 degrees and rising.
And they had about 4 hours to correct the situation, or they would have a nuclear event.
The core would melt through the reactor and start a thermonuclear explosion.
Scuttle the boat. Get the men off in rafts.
We will not abandon this boat. So their way of dealing with the overheating of the reactor was to create a jury-rigged cooling system. Use their fresh water supply. They had 30 tons of fresh water on board and piped that into the reactor in an attempt to bring the temperatures under control. But they're fighting a largely invisible foe, radiation.
We don't have radiation suits.
The warehouse was out. They sent us chemical suits instead.
You might as well wear raincoats.
The sailors have to go into this reactor, I mean, awash, just walking through it to try and repair this weld where the leak has occurred. And of course, they get these heavy, heavy doses of radioactivity.
You can only stay in that room for, a matter of minutes. Well, you really shouldn't be in there at all.
To capture the claustrophobic feel of being trapped in a floating time bomb, the filmmakers insisted on recreating the interior sets to their original scale.
I didn't want to cheat the submarine size so that it was more comfortable for us to shoot in.
Okay, Ian, stand by to shoot.
So it was exactly the size of the K-19. Now you add on to that all of the equipment, and suddenly that space, which already is not terribly large, becomes almost microscopic.
This is some serious claustrophobia, man.
Well, there's a lot of things in order.
For Liam, even just his size in the confines of these compartments, it made things a little bit difficult.
Not a very good entrance. The first question I asked was, they must have had a height restriction, but apparently they didn't. And there was one Russian captain who was apparently 6'5" or 6", I believe. So he just learned how to walk in those cramped conditions,
Okay, cameras up, picture up.
We're shooting in very difficult environments. It's very close. It's hard to get a camera. It's hard to get lights in. We constantly have to reinvent and make it up as we go along.
Can I just try that one more time, Bill?
To allow for unrestricted camera movement, Bigelow and the production designer developed special tracking rigs.
Mark.
And action.
We've had to accommodate the camera actually moving from compartment to compartment. This was a very difficult challenge. So we built in monorails in many of our compartments where the camera tracks with it, We try and hide these, make them look like pipes for the most part, and you can't really tell the difference between something that's accommodating the camera and something that's part of the set.
Watch out!
As the crew desperately works to cool the reactor, the situation goes from bad to worse. Radiation begins to spread throughout the sub, and the crew is confronted with a new series of crises. To prepare the cast for shooting these scenes, the producers hired 2 former submarine captains to stage a series of disaster drills.
On water! Advance on the fire!
They had them putting out 100-foot walls of fire, and the heat coming off it was unimaginable.
Well, the training here has been extraordinary. It's real, if you pardon the pun, baptism of fire.
Fire, fire, fire! Fire in the missile compartment! C3, C4!
Then they'd fill an area with smoke and put like a little flickering light, which you've got to find. And you could not see anything. And it's a bit hairy, you know?
You're bumping around, you're hitting your head all the time, and you could see how the chaos of if something goes wrong, how it can spread through a ship like wildfire.
Finally, we did hull rupture drills where the compartment itself would submerge in the water, and their survival was dependent on their ability to counteract the situation.
That was so awesome. I don't think any classroom experience could prepare you for getting a face full of water as a pipe breaks open. My adrenaline is pumping right now so much, and I can totally appreciate what these guys go through.
Be there! 100% completed! We just saved our ship!
Bigelow was involved in every aspect of the production from the time she began developing the script more than 5 years ago.
What is unique about Catherine as a director is that she brings a very strong point of view to a film. She had done tremendous amount of research on K-19, and then she worked on the script for years.
And action.
She's interested in material that Hollywood considers to be the province of male directors. And I think that's a tremendous asset to her. She comes at it from a different point of view.
All right, let's shoot.
Bigelow's ability to balance the taut interior scenes with the complex logistics of the exteriors was a constant source of inspiration for the cast.
You don't know what it takes to run something like this. It's a bit like orchestrating a 3-ring circus, and she's the conductor.
Perhaps the greatest challenge for Bigelow and her crew was shooting at sea, utilizing a massive maritime fleet.
We have 5 major picture boats. That's the K-19 itself. Then we have the next Canadian frigate that has been changed to be the American destroyer. We also have a rescue sub, and we have the sail barge that has a full working conning tower and bridge.
In addition to the on-camera fleet, there were 27 support craft, including 5 tugboats, 2 prop boats, a camera vessel with a 45-foot camera arm, and 6 safety boats. If anyone from the cast were to go overboard, the medics would have 2 minutes to get them out before they were incapacitated. Overall, the production of K-19 took several months and stretched across 2 continents.
Yeah, start the smoke candles, please. Smoke candles lit up, please. Yeah, hold, please.
The scope of the film was fairly daunting.
Action!
The challenges inherent in shooting on multiple continents, shooting on the water, with an extremely large crew, it was beyond your wildest imagination. But even though the scope of the film was large, its humanity was very accessible.
This difficult task has fallen to you. Our fate is in your hands.
Ultimately, K-19 is the story of an unlikely group of heroes whose ingenuity, determination, and courage can finally be acknowledged.
They were an extraordinary bunch of men.
They will go to the edge and die if necessary.
What's interesting, I think, is to see how they change to meet the challenges that fate throws their way.
Prepare for emergency descent.
This ordinary man rising in incredible circumstances. And who knows what's inside all of us. You know, if something happens, you think, gosh, would I have the courage to do that or that or that, whatever the situation.
He turned himself into a hero.
These people come together because they know what their sense of duty is.
Open the head!
Heroism is defined by action, by the grace under pressure and the courage under fire. at a time when the unthinkable becomes thinkable.
Captain, we've been fired on!
Fighter Missile 3.
Contact?
No contacts.
Radar, sonar, contacts?
The amount of research and information that had to be both discovered and utilized in order to mount something of this scale with this much specificity and detail required certainly years of research.
It's a pretty unwieldy story and difficult to tell. A lot of technical detail, a lot of production problems. There are no submarines of that period available. It's a very, very ambitious piece.
Ready for firing sequence.
Fighter Missile 3.
We're all quite familiar with some of the recent submarine movies, and so it was a less, going back over and studying them and knowing what they were, and the obvious benchmark of Das Boot, trying to strive for something like that, and keeping it much more organic than some of the other movies.
The biggest challenge on this movie, and where I've tried to concentrate as much of my effort as possible, was just research on this movie. Fortunately, I have a team that they will dig as deep as they need to dig to get the correct information.
Mr. Adamov has got pictures how it is done, and all the devices, all the instruments, and all the pipes.
All the tools that were used.
That would be extraordinary. We had the great benefit of two terrific production designers, Callie Gilliason and Mike Novotny. And through wonderful resources and wonderful advisors and great support, we were able to get the actual blueprint for the K-19 itself. And so we built those sets to the exact specifications of the real K-19 with all the details, all of the equipment. And we were painstaking with the kind of detail that we gave those sets in order to achieve the kind of reality that we were looking for.
It's like a detective story. You get a little bit there and a little bit here, and it's like, making a puzzle, and it has to do with patience, and it came together, in my opinion, quite accurately.
We made a couple of trips to Russia for research and for location scouting.
Where was the repair made specifically?
А где были вот те, кто занимались ремонтом?
As you
They
say.
were on the lid of the reactor.
On
here.
the lid of the reactor.
Yeah.
Right, right. One thing that I think was so important for both of us was actually visiting the K-19 itself. We met in Moscow when we were in the height of pre-production. And there we were invited, actually the first Western civilians to be invited to the naval base at the Kola Peninsula. And there it was, and we actually stood on the K-19 in probably 25 degrees below zero weather in this sort of February, like cobalt blue sky in the middle of the day. It's an incredible experience.
I think those kind of experiences on the Scout, and going to this base and seeing the patina of the walls inside the barracks, seeing the shape of the boat and the aging of the boat, the quality of the light that you saw when you were there, all kind of set up visually like a style that wanted to happen.
Captain on the CCP.
Please.
Captain.
I tend to try to physicalize rehearsals in every film, and especially this one. I think no film demanded it more than perhaps K-19. And I wanted to give these boys both a sort of mental muscle memory of what it would be like to be in a kind of life or death situation.
None of us can learn exactly how to operate a submarine. I mean, that's absurd. I mean, look at this. So you don't want to randomly grab a dial and start turning it, but you know, we have technical advisors that help us out. So your actions, which you usually determine as an actor, are kind of set out for you by other people.
He could give order to the guy who stayed in the control board. Switch off.
My job by myself, it's trying to make some sense of historical truth as it was considered by Russian naval officer.
He's been a tremendous help in getting us a good feel, an authentic feel for the sub. We rely on him for everything from getting every bit of graphic correct to spelling mistakes, that sort of thing, to torpedo loading, to how a reactor would work, to how the captain would operate on the central command. These are all things we rely on Sergei for.
It's a great burden, and it's very hard to be responsible. But I'm trying to do, and sometimes I'm satisfied.
Catherine and Harrison just built a great rapport with Sergei when we were in St. Petersburg, and had a very, very easy way of communicating to us, not only procedures, but more of the subtler ways of how life was on a sub in those days.
On the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was a special training course in Halifax to put them not only in the atmosphere, but as adequate members of the real submarine crew. Because you know that the main difference from the surface ships was the brotherhood and the friendly relations, the special skill of submariners.
It turned them into a crew. And from literally, you're talking about a matter of days, they became so close with one another. I mean, they're friends now for life. And that's what they brought to the set.
I can't ask enough questions, exactly. I want to talk about the Navy then, I want to talk about the Navy now, I want to talk about like our Navy versus the Russian Navy. I can't learn enough, essentially. It's not enough time.
I would say our submarine is as close of a replica as anybody's ever seen and will see of a Soviet nuclear submarine from that period.
The movie K-19, it depicts a real K-19 and very closely, because I was in the real K-19 when I was a naval cadet in 1970.
We are recreating an era which happened 50 years ago almost, the 60s in Russia. And I thought you would just go to Russia and find everything you needed. But it wasn't so simple. I mean, they've been incredibly efficient getting rid of all this stuff. And, I mean, if you needed a certain item, there was this one factory in Siberia that made it, and that factory closed down 5 years ago, so you can't get that item. So we have recreated a lot here in Northern America, and we have sort of been scrounging and gathering in Russia all of the things we needed.
In order to do the sequence in the reactor compartment, I needed to know about nuclear physics. And as we began, I had a nuclear physics expert who was from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he told us about the Cherenkov effect, which is that kind of otherworldly blue light that takes place when a reactor is beginning to melt down. Now, how do you replicate that on film?
We experimented with several things, you know, and ultimately, and ironically, because many of us have spent a great deal of time in the hotel bars at night, knew that gin and tonic has quinine in it, and quinine, when hit with ultraviolet light, glows blue. So through a series of tests, you know, we came up with the idea that we could add quinine to water and use UV lights and then get this blue hue. And the reason why it's such an unorthodox approach is you didn't want to have blue light contaminating actors in a submarine that's unmotivated, and you don't want to have colored water that is not really translucent and then stains clothes and skin when it gets on it.
This was the result of literally months of research, because the last thing we wanted was something that looked like, you know, that it was just like a music video or something.
In the interest of trying to cut costs, we decided to get concentrated quinine powder and add it to water. And the morning of the shoot, you know, with your whole cast ready to go, it didn't work. And ultimately, the only thing that did work is true tonic water. And so we ended up 700 bottles of tonic water, you know, rapidly pouring them in, throwing them, you know, this chaos of tonic water, and then came up with this really interesting light effect.
Even though there was probably 5 years between the point when I first heard about the story and shot that sequence, you'd think that you might become a bit immune to it. I could not. I remember sitting in that compartment and the hatch opens and out comes Christian Camargo in his radiation makeup, and he's shaking and there's sweat on his face. And there were tears coming down my face, and I know I was shooting it. I know it was a set. There's the crew, there's the cast, there's the lights and equipment. But suddenly it came to life, and I realized it was the recreation of these men making this profound sacrifice for us. People they didn't know, generations that would come after them, and if they didn't do what they did, who knows where the fate of the world would be. And then, of course, you know, I returned to the moment and probably looked at Jeff, and we both probably exchanged tear-filled eyes and then said cut, but it was a really moving experience.
Request permission to carry out reactor repair, Comrade Captain.
Permission granted. We want to be faithful as much as possible to the truth of what happened and to the truth of human nature. May God be with you. And we also want to make a movie, an entertaining, engaging, emotionally compelling movie. And the way you do that is piece by piece, each day, slogging away and trying to get the best possible result from each detail of the story.
And not compromise at any point for any reason. That was, I think, our collaborative and collective goal every single day on the set.
Brace for impact! Brace for impact! Brace for impact!
Using miniatures in movies has gone back now almost 100 years, and it's a great technique, and I think it's a lasting technique. It's reliable. We know how to achieve the look. You can shoot multiple camera angles simultaneously. You can basically garner a lot of footage in a very short period of time. You have to start with some scale model version of the actual set or structure. In this case, it's a 380-foot submarine. Jose made the decision to go with a 1/7 scale submarine. As a result, we had to scale everything accordingly. He built this ice pack that has a 1/7 scale ice blocks and scale snow, and they submerge it in this tank. Inside the tank is a track of which the scale submarine can travel along.
That tank is about 12 feet deep, and there's tons of water in there. It's full of water because obviously when this crashes out, there's water involved. And that's probably one of the hardest things is dealing with is to get the camera speeds right so that the water looks good, so it doesn't look like it splashes. A lot of volume of water is pushed out of the way, as well as the ice. And we pull the submarine very quickly, so it has some real energy and really smashes this out of the way. And then we turn the camera quite high speed, in this case at 96 frames per second. And by doing that, it means that the moment in time is slowed down by 4 times, and so those pieces don't just tumble across and just roll out the way. They have some real mass and some weight, and so that's probably one of the hardest things to get the right balance of, is using natural elements and scaling them, because it's very difficult to scale water, fire, and that sort of thing.
Once we actually get the shot, We review it on video. We have video taps attached to all the cameras, and so we can play back the shot at the desired frame rate. Once we review that on video, we decide if we like the action, if we like the way the cameras were moving in accordance with the action, determine any adjustments that we need to make. In the meantime, the divers go into the water, they pull the submarine back into the start position, the model makers go back and they start redressing the ice pack, and everybody gets ready for another round of shots. On any given day, setting up a shot for, say, one 3-second shot that might appear in the movie, it can involve a half a day to a full day worth of setup prep time in order to get the shot. They have to put fake snow. They use things like salt and styrofoam blocks covered with wax to represent chunks of ice. And all those have to be built in and structured together. And they're also pre-broken so that as the sub breaks up through the ice, it moves apart or breaks apart in the manner that we've so determined. Whenever you go into model work, do you shoot it outside or do you go on a controlled stage environment? If it's a natural light setting, we try to shoot outside. Of course, you give up, especially in a place like England, where it rains every 5 minutes. You're risking how much you can actually shoot, but often that risk is worth it. Sometimes it can be just the opposite. There can be too much sun. In this particular scene, we want to have sort of an ambient, slightly overcast light, and yet it can be bright sun, which can be just as bad as rain.
Video, please.
We try to get as many shots as we can in one day. Sometimes it's only one shot. Sometimes it's, we can get 2 or 3 shots. We run test after test, and then when we're satisfied with working out all the kinks, then we'll actually go ahead and shoot the shots for real.
Turn over. And action!
Once we actually photograph the particular shot, the work really begins. We will then take the negative and scan it into the computer, and then we have to augment that photographed background, in this case the submarine coming up through the ice, and put additional effects elements on top of it, computer-generated elements or practical stage elements. In this case, it'll be a combination of both. You have to definitely be patient and work with the elements, but in the end, it pays off.
The research was sketchy at best. For some reason, from all the other nuclear accidents and things like that that have happened, even the Hiroshima stuff, there was a lot of verbal description of things in very medical terms, but very few pictures to look at for medical purposes in case it got out to the public is the only thing I can possibly think of. Or it would have been documented photographically like all other things. But if you looked at the medical information and the way, the description of the kind of cellular destruction that goes on from that kind of radiation exposure, it's complete. It's right through the whole body. All the body cells start to disintegrate. But that was way too far over the top to be seen on film, and also way too over the top to be even photographed. So because we couldn't go that far, I restricted the swelling aspect of the makeup to the sinuses. And that's one part of it. That's the prosthetic aspect of it. And then once the prosthetics go down, then we create the burn, which is the cellular destruction, where we bring the red of the blood up to the surface of the face, blotchy and stuff like that, give the impression, instead of being cut or anything like that, that the fluids are coming up from inside. And then we sink that color below the surface with a rather thick layer of gel that we made up to simulate the top thickness of skin that has been completely destroyed. So in other words, it started to turn into a fluid. So eventually, these guys, in my mind's eye, and certainly the mind's eye of this design, is that at the end of the day, these guys would essentially die by drowning in their own body fluids. So the same thing that you see on their faces is likely happening right through their entire bodies. In reality, I think it would be so over the top that it would just look like really, really bad special effects makeup. In this case, we've pulled it back as far as we can to still frighten the audience, still give the visual impression that they're in a lot of trouble. I won't use any swear words there.
One of the opportunities of this role for me was, for the first time, I get to play a character, a scene, a very strong scene at the end of the film, where he's 30 years older. It was an interesting opportunity for an actor to play an old man. We created a rather complicated age makeup.
Aging Harrison to his mid-70s. We estimate the aging process takes about 2 hours application time in the chair. And I'm using about 7 different appliances on his face to create different folds that come with the age. Like that. I'll also be using eyebrows, earlobes, and various other appliances that go in different parts of his face. I'm using appliances made out of gelatins. I'm dissolving the edge of it with some witch hazel so it blends into the skin. These will later be colored to match the skin. Traditionally, these appliances were made from foam rubber, but gelatins enjoyed a resurgence of popularity lately because of its translucent skin-like qualities on film. And it works great for these small, little isolated features which can be very easily painted and joined to the skin.